Just last week, you announced a further expansion of your partnership with OpenAI. Talk a little bit about how these two coexist under the Accenture umbrella.
Sure. So all of our partnerships start with client demand. So the partnerships are responding to client demand. And we have a long history. Our clients expect us to be the #1 partner for every technology company that matters. And Anthropic, this partnership that we've announced today, is very important to our clients. And so that's the role we play, is to make sure that we can take the world's best technology and mix it up with industry knowledge, with process, and how to actually use it in the enterprise to get to an outcome. And as you know, today, it's all about when is AI showing up in the P&L. We call that the P&L pivot, and this partnership will help our clients make that pivot.
Well, I am curious then, Dario, if you can kind of talk about specifically the Anthropic tools, the idea here of standardizing how some of these AI agents actually connect to the various tentacles, if you will, the various applications out there.
Yes, so we are, I think we're going to start on the coding side. Some of the technologies that have been adopted quickly have been things like Claude Code, the tool we produce to help with development, and we've seen very large productivity gains with that. But we want to go beyond that to more general use of our tool, Claude, and we want to drive usage of the tool across areas like healthcare, life sciences, financial services, public sector, things that Anthropic has worked with for a long time. More broadly, I would say that enterprises have been experimenting with AI for quite a while. But I think really, as Julie said, with the P&L, the important thing is really to deploy these at scale and to actually drive ROI for them. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's why we have this whole business center. That's why we're training 30,000 people to use Claude. And we're going to work with CIOs of companies to track how they're using Claude through Accenture, how they're deploying the tools, what returns they're getting from the tools. So we're going to work with Accenture to manage the whole life cycle. We think these tools are revolutionary. We've seen that from their use inside Anthropic and many enterprises already. But the thing we're most excited for is to make sure that we can really spread these across the enterprise world, and that's where Accenture comes in and can really drive these things at a scale that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dario. I mean, you think about AI, some of these LLMs, they're very popular with consumers, individuals. They've been well socialized. But when it comes to enterprises, when it comes to that business customer, you touched on maybe some of the skepticisms that CIOs have in really adopting AI. As you look into 2026, this deal with Accenture, how much further does it put you when it comes to sort of unlocking the enterprise world? And what's the goal when it comes to 2026?
Yes, so we've already seen substantial enterprise adoption. This year, Anthropic's revenue went from $1 billion annualized rate at the beginning of the year to $10 billion annualized rate at the end of the year. So we've already seen a lot of adoption, and 80% of that revenue is enterprise. And within that, particularly with things like coding, but in other areas, we're starting to see very strong ROI. But the scale of this is so large, right? The scale of what needs to be done, right? There's hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of kind of enterprise productivity out there, value to be created. And so that while it has been growing quickly and we've been overcoming that skepticism, I think what needs to be done is enormous in scale compared to what has been done already. And that's why partnerships with Accenture are so important. That we really need to get to a scale that it's a young company needs to partner with someone who really understands the enterprise world.
And Julie, you made the point that one of the big questions here is when we're going to see AI show up in the P&L. There's also the big question of when you see AI really show up in the job market. And I'm curious, whether you're seeing AI slow down hiring for entry-level jobs over at Accenture, for example.
We are really focused on creating sustainable entry-level jobs with AI. And so our pivot in the talent side is how do we now take our entry-level people, or we call them reinventors, coming in and give them the skills so they can operate at a higher level. So for example, if you can now do things that maybe would have taken you 2 years, then you're losing 2 years of experience at clients. So how do we now, we're now introducing communication training to help close that gap. And so we believe it's way too early to call the end of entry-level jobs versus the responsibility that we have as a company and as companies across the globe to change the way that we train and that we think about jobs so that we have sustainable entry-level jobs.
I am curious, though, Julie, as you sort of prep your own folks internally for not only using the tools yourselves, but obviously the idea that these tools ultimately will then somehow be used by clients. What has been the uptake internally? How much retraining have you had to do for your own folks?
Our training has been massive. It starts with, back in 2019, we introduced classical AI training. So when ChatGPT came on, we already had 500,000 people trained in the fundamentals of AI in addition to the specialists. We just kicked off our entire 750,000 or so reinventors agentic AI training. And in fact, this partnership is all about tapping into the talent advantage that Accenture brings, because you need great technology expertise. You also need the industry expertise, like in banking. You need to know be able to know your customer. And so we're training all of our people, those who understand industry and function, and that's a big talent advantage.
So, Dario, but this goes back to the idea kind of what you're contributing, and the idea that a lot of people have been looking for more of a standardized model to be able to work off of. And obviously Anthropic, at least the way as you guys promote yourselves, the idea of open source, the idea of maybe a little bit more transparency. There was a report today in the information that you, along with a couple of others, including Google and OpenAI, for that matter, are going to be part of this AI foundation that will seek to create a more standardized system for some of this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So this is we're donating MCP, which is called the Model Context Protocol, along with some other things to a foundation. And what MCP is, it's a tool that kind of governs and standardizes how AI models intersect with data. If you think about it, you can think of an AI model as kind of the brain, right? You have a smart brain that knows a lot of things, and when I bring that brain into an enterprise context, there's all this kind of knowledge and tacit knowledge that is present in the enterprise. And so bringing them together is always a challenge. The way I often like to say it is, suppose I took some very smart person off the street and, plopped them into the middle of my enterprise, gave them an executive role and say, okay, congratulations, you're in charge, you get to make all the decisions now. As smart as that person is, they wouldn't, at least not right away, make immediately good decisions. So there's this integration layer that's missing, and I think these tools are designed to facilitate that integration layer and make it easier. And so we're excited to provide these things to the world and kind of make it easier to facilitate access to the technology across the world.
And Dario, before we let the two of you go, I have to ask while we have you, there has been reporting that you've been in early talks for an IPO as early as 2026. Can you confirm that?
Currently, we are just focused on growing our business and growing enterprise revenue, as you can see in this partnership.